So, I've been asked to use the silly voice for the abstract games. Alright. So yeah, I've been doing this series of, the walkthrough history and then this walkthrough Ahistory. And now I'm in something completely different, which is a set of abstracts. And I figured just for completeness, I'd go through the rest of the deck of my cards and look at the abstract games. Some of these I haven't played in a long, long time, haven't thought about it, and they never really sunk in very well. One that comes to mind immediately is something called Arch Rivals, that I gave a really good rating. Well, no, not really good, but a good rating for me for abstracts at 7. I remember it was something where you kind of had to build an arch at the same time as your opponent did. I have no real words on this. It was a short game. I remember having a little bit of fun with it. My ex and I played it a couple of times and liked it. I don't own it anymore. I don't know, much about it except that it was fun. And if you see it maybe as a thrift or something, it's worth picking up because it was cute. Here's one that definitely was a lot of fun. It's called the Avalanche. I rated it an 8. A few other people rated it things as high as 10s. This was a game where you have this kind of bingo type chart of colored marbles to fill, or colored spaces to fill with colored marbles. And you drop the marbles into this device that's filled with all these little switches. And you can kind of look and see logically what's likely to happen. It's all open. It's not like the hidden tower in Wallenstein. Yeah, whatever. But it ends up tricking you sometimes because it is a physical, an actual mechanical implementation of this. So sometimes marbles get stuck in places, things don't fall quite the way you'd expect. Sometimes you just miscalculate. It's an interesting game where they fall down, and whatever falls down after you drop a marble and you get to take, if it fits on your chart, you put it there. If it doesn't, you put it back in the pile. Backgammon. Now, this is a classic game. Played a lot of this actually. I've got it listed at 31 playings after I did the cards. But I remember at one point in my life, my ex-wife and I played a lot of this pretty regularly. At one point where we were kind of not really together, but I would go visit her a lot and was kind of living in her house at that point. We were just doing this as kind of an addiction. It was one of the few games. It was really the only game she had, and I didn't drag things with me for the most part. Black Spy. This was an Avalon Hill game, very similar to the card game Hearts. And I really, really despise things like this. So you might say, well, why don't you rate it close to what you'd rate Hearts as? And one of my friends, Dave, actually did that very thing. He rated it around a 5. I give it a 2 because I really despise these. Oh, here's another game, and I'll package it in a commercial format and sell it to you. In some cases, maybe the game's clever enough. For example, Guillotine, I'm not sure was actually used as a regular card game before it was packaged as one. So I'd be a little tempted not to score that as low. But here, this game is so obviously derivative of Hearts. And I know when Hearts was created. I know when this had its publication date. I don't like that. So I rate it very low because of that. I didn't give it a 1 because it's still a decent enough game, but I disliked it so much. Checkers, drafts, yeah. What can I say about it? It's an interesting game to fiddle around with. You have the feeling that you're playing something, because I think it's actually been solved, that's far less interesting than chess or Go. But to tell you the truth, as long as you're not playing it at the ultra-serious level, it's not a bad game at all. It's interesting, etc. To me, it's not much better or worse than chess. I rated a 6, which is, I think, where I gave chess. Strangely, maybe chess is under abstract military. Yep. Yeah, I gave it the same rating as I gave chess, and the same rate. Well, no, not the same rating as I gave feudal. I gave that less. I did this one, Democracy. This is a Descartes game. Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Uno. I did a video on it. I wasn't terribly impressed with it, but it's somewhere between Uno and Asshole, and it's got its own design as well. I don't think it's a bad game at all. I didn't give it a rating yet, but it's not the kind of thing I would play much. I could see it as a party game, though. Dominoes. Dominoes, I give a 5. There's not a lot of strategy as far as I see it to Dominoes. I know some people may think there is. Kind of cool thing about it is the tactile sensation, the slapping the dominoes down and against each other. There's some advantage to that, but there's not much to that. I have, for some reason, the Doonesbury game written here, but I've never played it, and I didn't video it. It didn't look interesting from what I saw about it. I wish I hadn't bought it. Fossil, somebody just recently panned this. I did a video of it. This is a game I picked up. I specifically looked for. I don't look for a lot of Euros, but this one impressed me the first time I played it. And I played it maybe once or twice total. Very pretty, nice pieces. Again, the stones, etc. And it seemed like an interesting game in terms of the strategy choices of moving your pieces around. Flinch. This was I gave this a 2. This is a Parker Brothers card game. I have no memory of it at all, except that I obviously didn't like it because I gave it a rating. Gestures. If I remember correctly, this was kind of a fake a reselling of charades. I don't have this marked. I got this in a bin of games that Milton Bradley, Hasbro, whatever. When Hasbro started buying everybody, they said, "Hey, you're running a game club. Can we send you some games?" Well, my game club was mainly an adventure gaming club, but I'm like, sure. And they sent me this whole box of these kind of family-style games. This one in particular, again, repackaging of an old classic. In the case of charades, I think I probably ditched it and left it at a Goodwill. Unimpressed completely with the idea. I don't think I ever played it, but it's left in here. Jenga. My ex-wife and I bought this for her mother, and then she and her mother had a big falling out, and we ended up just keeping it and playing it a few times. This is a game, manual dexterity type game. There's this tower of wooden blocks. Anybody my age would remember it pretty well, but maybe it's not popular now. You pull blocks out and put them on top, I think it is, and you're trying to make the tower go as sort of as tall as you can. Basically, you're trying to pull blocks out and put them on top without knocking everything over. And the higher the tower goes, the more risky it is. But really, the goal is not to be the guy who knocks everything over. Is all there is. Jumpin'. This is a 3M game. I was very unimpressed with this thing. Gave it a 2. I don't think there was much of anything to this game. I saw Gregor, hello Gregor, did a video review of it, and it looked like maybe he was having some fun with it. He and Rocking Horse Dream, I think, combined on it. So maybe there's more to it than I remember. I just always remember walking away thinking, this is, not even a terribly interesting game. It's not quite tic-tac-toe, but probably on that level. Mahjong. It's a game I only have because it was such a beautiful set. Something my dad picked up at an auction or something. Plastic pieces, but made to look like ivory. Probably from the 1920s. Very, very, pretty. My set doesn't quite match what anybody else's that I've seen does, what any of the rules do. It's missing some key pieces like jokers and stuff. I don't know what that means. This is a game kind of like Rummy. And to tell you the truth, other than being a complex form of Rummy where there are these special hands that are set, I don't see much attraction to it, except, again, the tactile sense of those pieces, like with dominoes. And it's kind of fun to play with it and maybe be drinking fancy girly drinks or something. I have no idea. Mastermind. This was a 70s game. Very, very... You know, you set up a row of colored pieces, and the other person asks questions by probing, by sending another set of colored pieces up, and you give him answers, how many he got right, how close he is to the right answer. And it's just kind of this, you ask a question, you get the answer, you ask a question, you get the answer. Just a puzzle going back and forth. Probably better as a computer game, I don't know. Not much of a game here. I did not rate it well at all because there's not much here but a puzzle that somebody else is providing you with that maybe you get lucky with your selection on. Owari. This is Mancala, essentially Avalon Hill's packaging of Mancala. They did a very, very good job, captured a number of different Mancala-based games. I think they got like a half dozen or so different games, a couple of which were really, really interesting. And I've played other Mancala variants since then. Overall, great tactile sensation of the polished stones or whatever. Especially with a wooden board, it's really wonderful. I had a lot of fun with this one. And there's a lot of thought. I don't know if it's solvable or not, but with the various different sized games and different rules for, you know, when do you keep spewing more pieces, it can be an interesting game. Othello. Now, this is a game that I think there's some serious flaw with. I don't remember, I never really chased down to find out, is it completely, you know, one player should win all the time, the first or second, I'm not sure which. I've had a lot of fun playing with it because nobody I ever played with was very serious about it. Usually, like with things like Twixt, and you can... I found that I could usually win most games, but it wasn't a guarantee ever. And I give it a pretty good rating for an abstract for this at a 9. Outwit. This is again a Parker Brothers game. I don't remember it. I gave it a medium rating. No real view of it. Pipeline recent pickup. I did a video on this. It's a game where you're building this like physical... So one of the 3M games I'm going to touch on, Twixt, is this in 2 dimensions. Well, Pipeline is sort of the 3-dimensional version of it where you're trying to cross from one side of the board to the other, but instead of just doing it in 2 dimensions, you're able to go up above and go around. Possible problem with it, you can run out of pieces and not be able to finish your line, and that could happen to both people where neither one can win. It didn't strike me as interesting. It's got a luck element in it, which I didn't like as much, but that may actually be the savior for it. Ploy, oh boy. You know, this was sort of this abstract, weird chess-like game where you move the pieces, I think, one at a time. Again, I don't remember much about this. This is another one of the 3M bookshelf set. I bought as many of these as I could because... well, I loved the shape of them more than anything else, but they put out some really neat games there. Scruples, this was, again, one of them. This came to me from, oh, no, this was a tag sale purchase. This is an interesting little game where, a party game, where you ask questions, well, you draw a question about a person, and everybody kind of tries to guess what their answer is going to be, and whether they're lying or not, and you vote on it. And it's kind of a cute game where majority rules, and you don't really have to get the person right. You just get a scoring based on whether you match with the person or the majority. Just cute. Sequence. This was a card game where you want to make 5 in a row cards on a board. It has team play. I remember some of my friends being really into this. I wasn't too impressed with it. You had kind of cards that could cause different actions. It used a basic regular deck of cards that came with the game that's a sequence on the back, but to match to spaces that you could control on the board, you would put a token on the board to indicate that you had played that particular card. I didn't see much more than kind of a random 5 in a row type game. Taboo, what the hell was this? Was this like a... this may have been the charades one. I don't know. Again, this came in my Hasbro bunch. I was unimpressed. Terrace, this was an interesting game. Again, an abstract, and again, I don't remember much about them. This is the problem with my abstracts, is they really don't stick in my mind because there's no story there, so who cares, you know? I remember being kind of impressed with this. I gave it a 6. Again, it was kind of a chess-like game where you're moving different pieces differently. It seemed interesting, but not much solidified there. Twixt, on the other hand, this is an abstract that's stuck in my head. Feels like Go to me. Feels like the same kind of pattern matching behavior that you have in Go. There's a difference, however, which is I think somebody's more or less proven that by the original rules, the game is completely unbalanced, and I guess it's the first player should always win. So there was an alternate where the first player, I think, plays a piece, and then the second player has the option to take it or to pass and let the first player keep it. That's an interesting option. I've never gotten to the point where we were at that level. I think I've never lost a game of it. It is possible to draw the game, though. And that was another possibility. Maybe you would always draw games if they did. Really cool game where you're crossing from one side of the board to the other. There's certain patterns that just develop. You can jump from one place to another, and those begin to occur, and then the defense is placing right where the other person would want to place to set up their double linking or whatever it is. Sort of like a very simplified Go feel to me. Did it... Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I had something to say. I don't remember what. Yahtzee. Okay, so I'm no big fan of Yahtzee. I gave it a big 3. Lots of die rolling, not a lot of decision making in it. Yeah, you got to decide what you're going for when you roll the dice. Maybe it's more than Cosmic Wimpowder or some other dice games, but when it comes down to it, it's a dice game. There's not a lot to it, and it really didn't excite me too much. I've got some people who rated it fairly well, actually. And liked it a lot more. Generally not gamers, though. Most gamers found Yahtzee very, very disturbing. Zap. Now this is what I consider the absolute worst game I own. This was made by Scoremore, a sort of a bar equipment type company. They put dartboards and stuff like that out. And this is really just an exercise in a lot of die rolling, a lot of risk damage for no purpose. There's essentially no strategy in the game. I've got written on here, the picture on the back of the box is the best part of the game. And it's got like these 3 really happy looking 70s nerds sitting on a bar stool playing this thing and looking like they're loving the game. And you'll see that over, somebody's got the picture of that over on the Geek. We used to bother one of my friends who rated this a 4. And because most of us, basically we would play this game and somebody would rate it, say, a 2. And then we'd say, okay, you have to play it again because we're going to make you rate this a 1. You have to have the full experience. Well, he started refusing and raising his rating. I think he had a 3 originally and went up to a 4. Perhaps just because of the misery it would inflict on other people. Breakthrough, this was a 3M game. I seem to remember you're able to, you move one piece at a time, and you're trying to kind of surround an enemy piece to defeat it, to capture it. One player's trying to get his flagship to the edge of the board, the other player's trying to capture it. And apparently this was based on an ancient Viking game. I don't know how similar it is to it. Chess, what can you say about chess except, it's an absolute classic. I never liked it much. I've given it a big old 6 for the simple reason that chess felt to me like one little slice of Go. getting mugged in the corner. It felt like an entire game of chess was about trying to set up this trap for someone. Whereas in Go, you generally don't try to set up a trap. Well, I feel like you don't. I feel like it's a friendlier game where both people are very clearly expressing what they're doing to each other. I don't know. Maybe competitive Go is different, but almost all chess games I've seen have been about holding back and trying to surprise your enemy with something that they didn't see. As opposed to Go, where we're constantly saying, okay, let's go back 3 moves and see how it would work out this way. Again, that may be the non-competitive aspect of the particular players we had, but we didn't do that with chess ever. Feudal, this was a 3M game. Feels kind of like chess, except you can move all your pieces at once. There's some terrain on the field, which keeps the first player from winning immediately. You can play this in teams. It just doesn't feel good to me. I gave it a 4. I just don't know what to say about it. I don't think it was a lot of fun. Go, as far as I'm concerned, this is the best game ever. I've given it a 10. It is perfection. I am nowhere near adequate enough to play it against people, but at least anymore, and I never really was very good at it. But I saw this as the ultimate challenge for trying to design an AI against. Hexagony. This is an Avalon Hill sort of abstract military, very abstract. Throw some luck in, you roll dice to move around this little supply board to capture supply markers so you can make attacks. A weird little game, doesn't really feel like a war game at all. Kind of feels like an abstract, but I don't know, with the dice and everything, it just feels like a very weird kind of abstract. Facts and 5, 3M game, this may be the best trivia game, the coolest trivia game ever invented. In this one, and you'll see this in, so this got essentially reworked into categories. But in Facts and 5, you have this set of subject cards that have categories that you're competing in, and the players have a lot of choice as to what the categories are going to be. And then there's random letter draws to see what you have to pick against them. Categories follows the same general principle, but this is sort of a grown-ups categories. Instead of things like flavors of ice cream, you can end up with things like World War II general prosecuted at Nuremberg. You can end up with very, very specific areas of knowledge and very general ones. And the cards themselves lead you towards more mature subject matters. Not in the sense of being dirty or anything, but in the sense of things that an adult would understand and enjoy more than categories perhaps provides. Not that you couldn't maybe tailor it more towards a children's game. Geographics. Some geography trivia game where you get points from answering questions, and very little playing of this. Global Pursuit. This was a National Geographic game. They did a really, really good job on this. I gave it a 9. My ex-wife gave it a 10. You're kind of building a map of the world as you're answering questions. And the map matches to the questions in some way. I don't remember it terribly well, but I remember being very impressed with it every time I've played it. Actually ran into this at my department chair's house. He had me over in Eugene for Thanksgiving dinner or something, and we played this afterwards, and it was very cool to see, you know, a game that I already liked and knew out there. Image. This is a 3M game again, where you come up with an idea for a character and you play cards developing that character as you go, and eventually play a letter card which ends that character's name, or which begins that character's name, and then you score points for the character. You can be challenged if you don't have something legitimate. So, for example, if you were to put, you know, non-fictional, ancient 20th century sports star, well, that probably is not one person for real, so somebody would challenge you on that combination. You can also overplay aspects. So, for example, if somebody has sports star, you could replace that with politician by matching the same type of card. Let's see what I'm doing on time here. Okay, we're not going to be able to finish this one, so I'm going to boot this and connect another one. Okay, so let's keep talking. King chip. It's another, and I've got these kind of divided into sections, which is why you're seeing this. This is, we did the abstract militaries that ran from breakthrough, really through hexagony. Go, chess, those things. Right now we're in the abstract trivia category as a whole. And in there, King Chip is the next one. Now this was kind of a weird little find. Just all computer related questions, okay. But I think the game was written in like 1978 or something. So you have to really know your computer stuff from like pretty much the earliest days, but also the focus is on like the early to mid 70s, which, you know, the details, the information that you're expected to know, some of it's wrong now. Actually, some of it is stuff that isn't just historical, but, you know, indicated some limitations that don't exist anymore. For example, on transmission rates and stuff. And also on best, you know, what is the best encoding method for something? That isn't the case anymore. Power Trip. Now this was a very, very pretty game where you're trying to control constellations by answering trivia questions. The rules as written seem to lack a little bit of an excitement, but we found certain modifications changed the game quite a bit and made it more exciting when you're challenging other people nicely. I only rated it a 5. I felt it had these kind of fixed books of questions where they were all in order, and you kind of felt like you could run through the set of questions once. Unlike something like Trivial Pursuit, you'd have no randomness, no reshuffling, nothing to bring the questions, to keep them out of that fixed order. Ripley's Believe It or Not by Milton Bradley. This was kind of a cute game, not just because the turn marker was a bird, but and a turn. But you could kind of bluff on your answers to it. So you would state a fact. You travel around a board, and that generates questions or whatever. But you would state a fact and say, believe it or not. And somebody could deny it. And it turns out that, you know, some of them were fixed on the cards already and said they were false or true or whatever. But then there were other ones where you could just make up your own question, which was always very cool too. Of course, for most people, how they speak a question that they're making up at the moment is a little different from how they read one off a card. And that makes it a little shaky on that. Shakespeare, Evelyn Hill's trivia game about Shakespeare. So you circle a board and you're naming characters from Shakespeare's plays in order to gain movement. Kind of like a Trivial Pursuit type thing. Cards are drawn and there's a quote from the plays, and you have to name the play quoted or lose your next turn. Okay, well, I haven't known anyone who's knowledgeable enough about Shakespeare that this is even vaguely an interesting game. This is a really, really hard game. Most of these quotes are not, you know, the immediate thing you think of. There are further bonus points or maybe bonus levels or something for answering these quotes, not just as to the play that they're in, but which act and which scene. This is not a game for someone who isn't really, really into Shakespeare. And it's not a game, I mean, you can't just bring a bunch of people in some of whom know Shakespeare and some don't. It really is something, I mean, the minimal level of this is more knowledge of Shakespeare than I or anyone in my group really had. There may have been one person who knew enough of the plays, but you know, it's a vaguely interesting game, but unplayable by most people. Stage 2, I don't remember why I liked this so much. This was a trivia game. There was a twist to it, and I wish I had it written down here, where you answered one question and then went on to another one. Kind of, I don't know. I don't remember how that all worked, but everybody who played it, and we only played it once, rated it an 8, which indicates there must have been something kind of interesting there. I don't know if I still own it. If I do, it's at my mom's. Time the Game. This is by Hansen. You move around the board answering questions based on an era by decade and specific topic. You have to answer a set of questions for each decade correctly. I rated this really poorly. My ex-wife liked it for some reason, but no one else that I've played it with did. I can't remember much about it, except it wasn't a big payoff for me. Trivial Pursuit. This was a game from my very, very poor era. Tag sale, buy, whatever, Goodwill. You can always find copies of this. You move around the board. You're trying to get little, one little cheese slice of each color. Colors represent different types of questions, and if you land on the correct space and answer the question correctly, you get a marker saying you don't have to answer that kind of question again. At the end of the game, you bounce into the center of the board, and all the players get to pick a category that they think is your weakest or whatever, and then you have to answer a question there. The game ending when you've got all your categories already filled. A couple of problems with this. One is it's memorizable, which is to say, after you've played it a sufficient number of times, you know a lot of the questions and you know a lot of the answers that you wouldn't otherwise know. Bits of trivia stick in your head because they're part of this game and you've played it a lot. Solution to that, of course, is there's different sets and expansions, and you could conceivably shuffle them all together and make things even more random and big, or play them, you know, as kind of most people do, within one box, within one set at a time. I don't find that really helps much. You still, once you've gone through a set a couple of times, it's done. You know. You don't know every question, but you know a lot of them in a way that you didn't before. I also found that the sets, I don't remember what it was, Genus 4 or something, Genus 5, just started getting ridiculously easy. Even though I knew less about the era that they were in, I found the questions were getting easier and easier to the point where, you know, one starts to wonder, you know, people back in the 80s maybe were, I don't know, a little bit more learned. I have no idea. But the thing that becomes, you know, that's always hard for me, and it has always been kind of the popular culture side of things, the pink, which is the entertainment, maybe to some extent the sports, all the way, had some strength there. But even within those, I was finding them getting easier as we went into a period where I knew less about, which I found kind of disturbing. Another issue with this is it's possible to win the game without anybody else getting a turn. I never knew anybody who played that well, but one of the people we played with would claim, A, his father was that way, and he knew other people who were that way, who could just, you know, run the board, as it were, and end it before. So you have to kind of make a balancing of at least, hey, everybody gets at least one turn. The way that we usually played it, and the way it played out for us, you know, it didn't even really matter if you went first or last or whatever. Sure, you might lose a turn in there, but the games usually weren't that close. even if anybody could win it, it usually had very little to do with that. Ultimate Outburst. Don't remember. This was again in my Hasbro collection. I rated it reasonably well at a 7. It seemed like an interesting game where you're trying to guess words associated with a particular category. And then you're trying to guess the category from a list of words. Sounds almost like Family Feud. I don't remember, for the first part, and then the other part is the opposite. Final round involves bidding for a right to play a category as in the first round, but sight unseen. I have no idea. It allows you to play in teams. It allows you to play alone. I don't really remember. Duplicate Ad Lib. Alright, so this is a game where you roll a bunch of letters and you have to create a crossword out of the letters. And then you exchange the boxes of letters to the other player and they do the same. So you're both working with the same sets of letters and trying to construct words. And then you reveal your two sets of crossword puzzles, as it were, and score them. So it's kind of like, you would say it's kind of like Scrabble, but only from an uninformed view, because when you look at Scrabble carefully, it's not about creating crosswords of words. This is what this game focuses on. It doesn't matter where you put things for the most part, although you can score letters more than one time if they're the cross letter. But compared to Scrabble, it's much less of a game and much more of a crossword generating game. The game's more about crossword and less about the gamey tactics that Scrabble is. Speaking of one that's more about the words, Boggle. Okay, this is a Parker Brothers game. You shake up a bunch of letters in this box, and they all settle down. You set it down, you set a timer. There's a timer in Duplicate Ad Lib too. And you try to score as many words as you can. Okay. Scoring is really interesting in this. In 2 players, it doesn't matter. You're just trying to get as many words and longer words that you can. But when you're playing it in more than 2 players, you only score words that nobody else has. So hunting down the strategies that work in 2 players, which is get as many words as you can down, don't work as well when you're playing with 4 or 5 people, because all those simple words are going to be gotten, so it's worth your effort to put your time in to try to search for the word that nobody else is going to get. A, it's probably worth more being a longer word, but B, it's also worth something, being one that no one else got. Different ways of playing it, different feels to the game based on the number of people, and it really a lot of fun. A couple minutes to play a hand of it, and just an exciting little game. Foil, this is another 3M game. This is one of the cooler word-generating games. I didn't rate it terribly well because I don't do well in it, and I don't enjoy playing it, but I have a lot of respect for the game, actually. What you do is you're dealt this hand of letter cards, and you have to form words out of the letters. Then you keep the word, and you write them down. Then you keep the words together in your letters, scramble them, and hand them to the other player. And they've got to figure out what your words were that you've put down. Now, it's possible that other words could exist there, and I think that's handled in the scoring. But there are limits to your word scoring, right? So on one round, I think you have to give a 6-letter word and a 4-letter word or something like that, or a 5-letter word. I don't remember how they actually fall apart, but you have to give specific limitations to the words that you pick. And if people don't get your words, you score points. And if people do get them, they score points. Like if they figure out what you put down. So you want to be very careful to kind of be tricky with the words you choose so that the other person can't score and is kind of stymied. Flounder. This is a cool game just because it has a bell. Ding! You're competing to form a word of a specific length and type. so you're looking at this board and pulling pieces off, and once you have a correct word that fits the requirements, you ding in, and then you score it. And if you ding illegally, you get penalized. This was a little too fast-paced for my taste. I gave it about a 6 again, the same as I did for Foil. But I want something kind of in between the two. Neither one really works for me. Probe, this is a game where you select words, 12 letters or less, and put them in these slots on your cards. And then it plays kind of like Hangman, with players guessing at the letters in the opponent's words. And if you guess and complete the words, by the way, this is abstract word games. And then you get kind of these random cards drawn each turn that affect the basic sequence of it. I didn't rate this terribly well, and I don't think it really warranted a lot of exploration as a game. It didn't really win it as a big word game here. Here's one that does, though. RSVP, this is a Scrabble-based game on a vertical board. Again, take away some of the gamey stuff out of Scrabble, right? You don't have spaces that are worth double, triple, whatever. You're putting blocks one at a time and competing with each other, trying to take control of words. And your board, well, up, down, it works the same. Both players are going from up to down. But left, right, you've got mirror images because the board is kind of this hollow piece where you're sticking letters in. You can challenge if somebody else doesn't have a word. If somebody places a letter that does not work with other letters, if they have no word that they could create, not within the block limit, but at all, they can't think of a word. So for example, if you put QZ together, you're probably not going to find a word that works that way. Other than that, though, it's really kind of a fight to get control of the words, and the left to right is where the dominance is, because up, down, they're both sharing the same word. Scrabble, again, this is the classic. You have this hand of letter tiles, and you score by forming words on the board. What's wrong with Scrabble? Well, it's not about having a good vocabulary. It's about knowing lots and lots of two-letter words without necessarily knowing a damn thing about what they mean or what they're about, and kind of knowing how to play the board at any given time. Still an interesting game, I have no question about that. It's just, it's not what I want when I look at a word game. So what is it? Well, it's an interesting game that I'm not terribly fond of, and I've given it a 5. Most other people rate it better than I do. I found that the best for me for Scrabble was playing Speed Scrabble. Take some of the fun, take some of this downtime, because when you're sitting there in a 4-player game and everybody and somebody's sitting there for 5 minutes trying to think of how they can optimize their letters, I don't like playing that. It's just not fun for me. I don't mind that kind of attitude, and I don't mind it so much if I'm out and there's things to watch, or there's beer or something. But if you're playing this, in kind of a game situation, a night type situation, it just, I don't know, it's not a lot of fun for me. However, I did find it kind of fun when you're playing with, a 1 minute, 30-second, whatever time limit, and you're constantly having to slap your pieces down very quickly. I found that kind of cool. Might be cool with a chess clock as well, although chess clock gives you the chance to think a little longer. Upwards. This is a Milton Bradley game. I think I like this a little better than Scrabble. You're kind of stacking. You can cover up the letters, is what I remember like this. So you can change, again, it gives you the chance to morph words into something else. I don't remember a hell of a lot about it, except that I liked it a little better than Scrabble. But I don't remember if you could put down string. I don't even remember how it plays out, whether you put out strings of letters or not. So not a lot I can say. All right, well, that's the end of this series, and I don't have a really good idea of anything else like this that I want to do. I know there was some call for, keep looking at it under different lenses. Nah, this is my deck of games. This is how I sort them, and how many times can I speak about the same games? there are things that I would like to still speak about that I kind of maybe intended with this, was to look at things like comparison of periods without looking at the specific games, and what I like about a specific period, maybe stopping and discussing that more, or what I like about a specific scope of games. So, for example, why the hell is it that I don't particularly like operational games, yet keep clamoring for operational scale games in periods other than World War II, especially, but almost across the board, and really anything pre-Napoleonic becomes very rare indeed. You've got this kind of tactical to strategic shift. What's in between? Hey, hello. I want to see how they get into the battle. But here's the thing. I want this operational to inform the battle setup. That's always been what I like, and that's what I do in the SFB, strategic, operational, whatever, into the battle. Well, I want that in almost everything. I want to be able to set up a minis game from the map that I've got there. It's kind of interesting. Nothing there about abstract games at all. All right, I gotta load this one up. I'm short on bandwidth today, I think.